Jay, how you doing, man?
What's good, Wayne the Q? What's good?
Let's talk about Kevin.
Yes, let's talk
Kevin
about Kevin.
Kevin Samuels, right?
Kevin Samuels. Yeah,
The one and only.
the one and only man.
Well, first off, just rest in peace to him. I will just say this before we start. I don't think it's right that people have bashed my man so bad.
Yeah,
I didn't know the guy at all. I heard his perspectives and his views were particular, for him. And I just don't necessarily think, we as a people should be doing that. But at the same time, that's the thing about opinions. Everybody has one.
right.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The kind of uproar and backlash. It's kind of a mixed bag. It's interesting. He's very controversial, but I don't know. And I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. Not saying that I know him, but then sometimes, you kind of could tell where people are kind of coming from, even if you don't agree with exactly what they're saying or how they're saying it. If you kind of check out stuff for long enough, you can kind of see people's intentions, good, bad, or indifferent. If you actually kind of, spend time with whatever it is. Like somebody's movies and stuff. If you see one movie, you kind of don't really know where they're coming from. You see 3 or 4 of their movies, you start seeing themes and stuff, and you kind of get to know more about the person as you go along. And so I think it's interesting that people are just having a sampling of some of his more controversial stuff and kind of rolling with it, and without actually investigating for themselves, just making these harsh judgments to the point of almost celebrating somebody's passing. And it's weird to me because, to be honest, for me, he was kind of like a guilty pleasure, and it was interesting because it was hard to know who to share his conversations and topics he would talk about. You almost had to be careful about who you brought it up to. It's weird. It's almost kind of like politics, you don't know if you could say it to the person or not because they might take it the wrong way.
Right.
And sometimes you want to talk about things that you enjoy without having to go through and explain or convince somebody of something. Sometimes you just want to have the conversation without, oh, he's this and he's that. And you got going this whole thing about how it's not necessarily like that, and go check out more of his stuff and all this stuff versus just having the conversations. Even with doing this conversation, I was trying to think who can I have this conversation with, or who's going to be fair, because I'm not necessarily want somebody who necessarily liked him or agree with him or agree with me, but where we could have an actual discussion about the things he talked about, his effect on the world, and people who dug what he talked about and stuff like that. So where did you first hear about Kevin?
I think it was his first viral controversial video.
The average at best one?
Yeah, and it was where he was talking to the woman and just basically, telling her I can't remember exactly what it says. I don't want to be wrong, but I'd imagine, I think it was someone's opinion where he was saying if you're over a certain age, you shouldn't be extra picky, you know what I'm saying, or something to that effect. And I remember it just all of a sudden just went viral. It was just everywhere. You just couldn't, you couldn't turn on social media, without hearing it, you know what I'm saying, or hearing his perspective. And as I watched more videos, like you said earlier, you start to see his kind of the thing that makes him who he is, or his perspective. You start learning about his perspective. So but it definitely did catch me off guard when I first heard him. Whoa, wait a minute,
Yeah, it was the same thing for me. I'm not for sure if it was the one or not, but that's the first time I heard somebody just kind of blatantly kind of going off on a woman, and it wasn't really messy, but he was a matter of fact, and it came to a ranking and how she looks, and how tall are you? What's your size? That's a taboo. You don't ask women their age or their size or anything like that. And he's just kind of leading into the conversation like that. And it was just a shock to kind of hear it. Because I remember just seeing the clip and I was thinking wow, this is crazy. And he calling this girl average, and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm thinking that's what is this? And at first I was kind of upset. I'm like, why is he talking to a woman like that? You know, that's not cool. But what was interesting was like in my head, I wasn't necessarily disagreeing with him. I think I was more shocked that, you know, he said it, you know. And I just thought it was like mean and rude. And so just seeing that clip, I thought, man, this guy's a jerk and this is just crazy. And I'm surprised he was even going there. And then I went and watched the actual full conversation. And that's where I was just like, okay, she called in on a night where he normally had a night where people could call in. I think he called it the smoke show, and people could call in if they have any complaints or they don't agree with something that he's saying, then that's where you kind of vent, and then he'll have a discussion with you to kind of work it out. And and then she went on there for, I guess, I don't know what the technical word for it would be, but you know, somebody wanted an evaluation. I guess she wanted to be evaluated. And he's like, well, this is the wrong night for this. You know, this is a different kind of show tonight. And she's kind of persisting on, well, you know, I normally sleep and I'm up now. And, you know, I just wanted to ask you. And I guess he was just like, okay, well, you know, because normally he charges for consultations and stuff that he has, like, you know, a personal one where you could discuss and whatever. And and she was kind of pushing past what he was there to talk about. And he's like, well, and he kind of goes through the line of asking her what she wants and stuff. And then that's when he started asking his questions and seeing the full conversation, not saying that he was justified of saying what he said because she called in on the quote unquote wrong night. It was just the fact that she basically asked for his opinion and he gave his opinion. And so it's almost kind of like you kind of get what you pay for. It's almost like going to a seafood restaurant and you wait in line, you have a reservation and you go sit down and they serve you seafood because you asked for it, and then you get offended, you know. I don't even think she was necessarily offended. I think more people were offended by what he said to her than she was even doing, because in her situation, she was kind of asking for his opinion. And I'm sure she was probably surprised by, or maybe not, because she probably was a viewer of his show and kind of knew how that went. And so I think maybe her issue, if anything, was trying to wrap her mind around his advice and what he was saying to her, you know. And what I noticed was a lot of women that was calling in asking for what he thought couldn't just get over what I would consider like maybe a basic concept, but I was seeing a pattern of situations where the person's reality wasn't matching the rest of the world. Or I think a lot of times we live in our own delusions to keep us from not giving up, or to keep us motivated, or keep us from being hurt or whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that they're delusions. And with those delusions, you cannot grow, you cannot expand, you can't be better. Because if you are always thinking everything's fine because you don't want to deal with it, or you don't want to acknowledge your environment, that doesn't keep your environment at bay from impeding on you. And so even though it would be harder to deal with something blind, you know, instead of acknowledging it, sometimes I think a lot of us choose to move that way. We'd rather fight in the dark instead of having the lights on, dealing with the truth, and then actually having a plan to take care of it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then after I saw that video, the full video, I felt differently about it. I still thought it was harsh just because I wasn't used to hearing that direct kind of talk. But what he was saying, I didn't disagree with it. And then I was like, well, let me see what else is going on with him. And I was going back to other past episodes, and I learned stuff like he wanted to save like black marriages. He wanted, especially, you know, kids, but especially young boys, to have their fathers in the home and things. And he would just throw out these statistics, and he would have all these facts and stuff, and he was consistent about that. And even though people were taking it as him dogging black women, I think it was more reality check, and they just didn't want to hear it, and they took offense to it. But just because you take offense to it doesn't mean it's not true.
True.
and then I ended up going further back, and I saw him having conversations with men. And man, okay, not that I have it all together, but he had me feeling like he wasn't even talking to me. He was talking to some guy calling in, and he's talking about the things that he wants. And he's like, okay, well, you know, how many hours you working in a week? You know, what's your weight like? What do asking all these kind of questions, you know, like how you expect to get anybody and you living with your mom, How you expect to get anybody?
Right.
You don't shave. You don't pull yourself together. What are you
Right.
what are you expecting to get if you not, out there putting in that work? Nobody gonna want you like that or gonna dust you off. And I didn't realize that, his first 2 years, he was just talking to men only. And so to hear that, and like I said, I'm a grown man, in my own situation. And even some of the stuff he was saying, it's like, yeah, I could probably tighten up on some of that stuff myself. And I've been around for a while. But then I saw like, okay, well, he's an equal opportunist when it comes to, telling people about themselves and kind of shaking them out of their delusion into pulling themselves together. It's like you could take it or leave it, but if you're lucky enough to have something pointed out to you, that's the truth. Even though your normal feeling will be to reject it because you don't want to accept it, for those who choose to listen, you can save yourself a lot of time and trouble and gain some insight, because it's so hard to see things on your person when you're in your body. It's hard to see outside of yourself. You're seeing more others than you do yourself. Very seldom we see ourselves in mirrors and things like that. Some people even avoid mirrors. So that's how much we don't want to see ourselves or deal with things with us. And we're so focused on the outside. And so when things are reacting to us, we're not considering what people are seeing. Our look, how we hold our shoulders, if our faces frowned up or smiling, all those kind of things we're not aware of. But people are constantly on the other side of us reacting to it. And we're thinking like it's them and not considering our part. And so I think he was a good wake-up call for acknowledging your part in it. And I think a lot of people wasn't ready for it, but I think a lot of people also were ready for it and took the advice or perspective and tried to do better for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you summed it up perfectly, man. I mean, when you actually start like listening to what he said, you'll see like it's different than what the social media part of it like picked up and what they wanted, to go viral. It's like, really you just see like all you hear about is how messed up he was and how over the top he was and stuff. And then like if you say, well, let me take a step back and think about what generation I'm in. So this new generation doesn't like to be told anything. This new generation doesn't like to be confronted with the truth. Remember, that's the one thing like baby boomers say about the new generation. It's everybody got a trophy, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, and so when you think about that too, when you think about who kind of runs the social media thing, it's this generation. And so take that into consideration too, and then think, oh, wow, okay, so the new generation, this person might actually be saying something real, legitimate, and harsh, and well, very harsh, but honest, not necessarily mean, but honest. And people just aren't ready to hear that. Like, what I'm saying? There's a cognitive dissonance sometimes that we kind of build. It keeps us from really like seeing like the truth. But I remember like one time, I think he said certain things that people would think but didn't want to say out loud. Because I mean, some people think that like it's like, okay, if you, and for all the listeners who are underage or whatever, I'm not. This is not my viewpoint. I'm just putting it out there. Like, sometimes, men have that perspective where it's like, okay, we're trying to come at you, right? And get to know you and stuff. And then, we find out you didn't had, 3, 4, 5 guys, and all of a sudden, and 3, 4, 5, baby fathers, all different. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, with us, you're going to change. The male guy, this new guy, you're gonna change, and all of a sudden it's, I got super high standards, and that's fine. Everybody should have standards. Everybody should, right. But at the same time, don't make it harder for the new guy.
Right.
That might actually be good for you, but at the same time, like, you've built up such a wall because of these other 4 guys. You're making it super hard on him, super stringent on the next guy, whoever it is.
Right.
That it's almost like, why am I doing this? Because there's already a lot of baggage that comes with that, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got to deal with all that. But then plus you making it harder for me too. And it's like he would say something like that. Yeah. Now people might think it, but groupthink says you can't say that out loud, right? We have to, the person can think that, but the people have to think differently. He would say, no, that's wrong to say that out loud. And I think he would just say something like that, and be honest like that. blunt honest, like,
Yeah.
painfully honest,
Yeah, because he would point out the hypocrisy about how, like, what kind of man you want. Oh, got to be over 6 feet tall, over 5'11". They have to have this much money and blah blah blah. And then he's like, well, if a man, don't want to be with you because you're overweight, then all of a sudden he's a jerk, and he's,
right.
and he hates women. Like, wait a minute, women have their, things that they want as well. That seems kind of, And then you start kind of breaking down, like, okay, if you want somebody that makes all this kind of money, what percentage make this kind of money? Make that kind of money and black and single, And the number is like 2% or 0.5% or something crazy like that. And they thinking like, okay, so you're overweight, you have kids and all this other kind of stuff. Why would a guy making over $100,000 or six-figure guy with all this kind of stuff going on, no kids or nothing, why would he pick you? And they're saying stuff like, because I'm me, because I'm special, and it's kind of like,
it's like, yes, you are special in your own light. Yes, you are.
Right.
But the realistic piece to it, right? The realistic piece to it is, just as special as you are, this person is special too, and they're not overweight, and they're not this, and they're not that, and they don't have this, and they don't have that. And that's really it.
Right.
But it's like, saying that is like, oof, can't say that, and it's like, well, you can.
And they're not understanding it. They get offended versus like they're confused by it. And I'm thinking like, that's like, I don't think I would ever get confused that if I had a job that made $50,000 that I wouldn't be able to afford a Lamborghini. I wouldn't go to a shop to go look for a Lamborghini if I'm making $50,000. I wouldn't even window shop. I wouldn't want to play with my emotions like that, seeing something like that that's so far removed from what I can have to even see in my head. But to go up to that and think like, okay, regardless of what I have, I think I'm worth it. Me thinking what I'm worth is not necessarily the current market value. And sometimes you got to get what you think you are closer to what the market is saying you are, because you can say whatever you want to, but if nobody's buying, then that tells you the true value of whatever that thing it is that you're trying to sell, be it yourself, be it your car, be it artwork, whatever. There's a actual market that determines that, regardless of how you feel about yourself. And it's a big difference between how you feel and reality. And it's just a clash of that is just so crazy to see. I've never seen nothing like it before. I spent my life, especially as a black man, when it came to black women, as just being polite and just not saying anything if you didn't have anything to say that was nice. But and so I'm sure a lot of women walk around not knowing or living the delusion because nobody is coming up to them, loved ones or even people who don't like them, not saying anything to them about it. It's almost like if you got a booger in your nose and nobody says you have a booger in your nose, do you really have a booger in your nose? And to
not
you,
to your knowledge.
Yeah, not to you. But would somebody want to walk up to somebody who got something in their nose? They probably avoid you.
Right.
And you thinking like, well, I feel good. And I'm telling you, you don't. You feel good, but you don't match what you think you are. And therefore, you're getting a different reaction than you're expecting. And I thought it was interesting, too, how he play on the word average. People hear average and get mad. But average is what most people are.
Right.
Because, like, he stood up for, so it's like average men. He would call them, like, like Henrys or whatever. But it'd be average men that's hardworking and stuff. Now, he ain't talking about no bums and thinking women should just be with bums and stuff. But he would get mad if a woman saying that she's settling when it's a guy that really would match her better and she just wants what she wants. And so it wasn't necessarily a high earner. What would he call? High value.
Oh, high value. Yeah.
And so the women would hear that and be like, yeah, I'll take one of those, as if it's just something you could just pick out. And so he'd be like, well, you're average, so why don't you get like an average guy who's a plumber or he got his own business and stuff, because they make a lot of money too, and they kind of like, no, they want the lifestyle. And so they want what they want, but it's almost like you may want him, but do you think he's looking for you? And it was just so weird for it just not to make sense to some of them. It's just hard to, it's almost like somebody trying to walk into a wall and you just looking at them like, how many times you gonna keep hitting that wall when you realize there's no door there? Like, it's entertaining, but it's kind of unnerving as well, because it's just like, man, are you really just not that, and yeah, when you do the ranking, and even though they got mad at him about, his ranking thing, but he would tell people, judge yourself between, I guess, 1 and 10, but you can't use 7. And he would say like, well, a 8 would be a Beyonce or somebody like that. And people would be like, I'm a 10. I'm a 10. And their weight isn't right. They don't really take care of themselves. They got all these kids and stuff, and not ignoring the talent of Beyonce, ignoring the success, the people that she's connected with, all the other stuff, as if that doesn't matter. I'm just as cute as her, so it makes me the same as her. Oh boy, it was just.
And so, part of the other thing I think comes up too is like, I think one of the reasons why everybody was like up in arms too is like, because you're always taught you should always go for what you want, and you're always taught that, you're special. Like, you deserve a bunch of stuff. Like, you do. Like, you work hard. You deserve what you want. You should be able to just go out in the world and get what you want. So when you're conditioned to think that,
Real quick, who's raised like that? Like, boys or girls? Or are you talking about everybody?
I think young people in general.
Okay.
We're already taught. I mean, we're conditioned to, go out in the world and, get what you want. You want something, you get it. I mean, that's, you want a TV, the one you want, you got the money for it, you go get it. You don't have the money for it, you put it on your credit card. You don't have the money for it, you borrow it. You don't have the money for it, you get it on layaway. But you still want it. Doesn't change that you want that TV. Like, you know what I'm saying? Or that car. Like, our community and like cars and, sneakers, for example, this is what we want, And so even if it's not necessarily fitting our lifestyle to have it, we still want it. We still going to try to do whatever it is to get it. And so because you're kind of conditioned with that mindset, same rule applies when you seeking people that you like, right? So we're already behind as a society because society kind of pushes what you see as attractive. Mm-hmm. So, of course, colorism has a play in that. So lighter skinned people are automatically more attractive, right? Certain body types and certain this, certain that, all those things are like pushed on us, like, from jump. And so, taking that into account, right? And then, so you grow up, you think, well, this is what I like. This is attractive, regardless of not what I got going, this is what I want. I should be able to go get it too, because I want it. Then, but of course you throw in the self-preservation kind of selfish piece, right? You don't really care about anybody else, and like what it is, you just only care about what you want. And which is, in life, kind of what it should be. But I think when you kind of roll all that together and you have like a kind of like a summation of all that slapping you at once, you're gonna think you could be this and be that, but still deserve this high earning person, man or woman, or you're gonna think you deserve this woman that does a bunch of stuff, you know what I'm saying? And so he's gonna think you deserve it because that's what we taught. You want something, go get it.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'll say boomers and Gen Xers are the main ones who will follow him. And so I think the folks that was calling in, the women and stuff that was calling in, they're older and kind of know better in a way. Or at least they should. And for dudes, just being a guy, we learn quickly the kind of the rules of the world and how it could be not fair. Like you have women that are, maybe for religious reasons and stuff like that, choose to be a virgin and they're in their 40s, right? It could be a guy who wants a woman, a good guy, and go his whole life without being with a woman. That's like possible. And it's probably more common than people would think. And so as guys, we kind of know we don't always get what we want. And we know that life isn't really fair. And if you don't kind of hustle and work it out, then we could just disappear as far as the world is concerned. Some do and some don't. I think that we have a kind of an understanding that if we're on the street homeless, then nobody's feeling bad for us. They're going to look at us like, how come you didn't do this or that? Or, nobody's like, what happened? we
Mm-hmm.
don't. I don't think we get that kind of grace. And something I thought was kind of interesting that he had mentioned about depreciation. I'm talking about, what do we have that gets more valuable as it gets older? Which is kind of a trick question, because it's kind of like nothing gets more valuable really as it gets older and used. Stuff depreciates. And I think, he said something I thought was very interesting too, about how women kind of have their time really in the beginning, early on when they're young. That's when they're at their prime and their value is high. And for guys, it's not so much. And I can attest to that from being a young guy.
Mm-hmm.
And as we get older, because really the women is almost like outside stuff. Like, you want a nice personality and stuff, but beauty, because a lot of stuff you'll put up with if the person is beautiful to you. You put up with more. But guys, you got to have some kind of status. You got to have some kind of, something. You got to be about something. You got to have something showing that you have some kind of success. You can't just be. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is, and it's not no bum guys out there just, hooking up, but, women are wanting them for something else. Maybe they, whatever. But, for the most part, you need to have, a job and be able to take care of a family and things like that. That's because it's almost like you can't, because not like there isn't women out there who, marry men for their money and status and stuff. Like, they'd be like, well, I don't love him, but, I feel safe and taken care of by him. And, marriage wasn't always about love and stuff anyway. A lot of times it was arranged, it was a thing that just like, two families, were kind of connected and be like, hey, my daughter, your son, that kind of thing or whatever. And people just kind of, worked it out,
Mm-hmm.
But that was just a thing to do. It wasn't like, they just hung out and stuff. This is kind of a newer thing. So wanting this perfect person, doesn't really exist. And it's just interesting to hear about, people leaving their marriages thinking there's going to be something better out there and get left out there and can't find anybody else. I think when men are older, it's easier to get women, or just as easy. Because at first I thought it was so weird when you would hear like an older man with a younger woman. And to me, that never made sense. I'm like, I want somebody around my age, because, we'll have the same kind of experience and things like that. And we'll probably be, kind of be even killed and stuff like that. And it was just interesting hearing him break it down. I'm like, I understand what, why the guy would probably be older, because the men that women are looking for, the things they want in the lifestyle, and ain't no way he could be in those places at 30. That wouldn't be a normal kind of thing. He wouldn't be, the guy would be until his mid 40s maybe, or something like that, before it'd be the kind of guy that be able to actually take care of somebody. Because usually the guys that's around the women's age that are younger, they don't have anything yet either. They're in the trenches and stuff. And then also, if you want somebody who's rich and powerful, have all the stuff, then you have to get in on that early. Like the ball player or something who wasn't nobody, but you was that girlfriend that always stuck around, or the guy who wanted to start a business and went from the ground up. And then, you were there the whole time, and look what he turned into. Kind of like how E40's wife, he's been with his woman since high school. And so he didn't have nothing when he was, younger. And he's this person now with all the success and money and all this other kind of stuff. And she's still there. Versus somebody who wasn't there for the journey and just want that type of person and had to, put nothing in it at all. No investment at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the person on top get a chance to choose, why wouldn't they choose something that's aesthetically pleasing to them? They wouldn't care about somebody that's necessarily older, who has opinions that they won't change, or just want to kind of do what they want to do. It's interesting how, I don't know, I think just relationships or something, but relationships for black folks is just, we have so much other stuff that's mixed in with that. It's just layers and layers of stuff. And we are just not on the same page for a lot of stuff. And it's just like, I feel it's unnecessarily bumpy. I think that the car has one steering wheel and you got two people fighting over the steering wheel, but nobody's watching the tires. Nobody's making sure the seatbelts are locked. Nobody's checking to see who's trying to get into the car. It's just interesting. And I think that the things he brought up and the way he talked about things, he brought light to a lot of stuff that people wasn't paying attention to. And he worded it in a good way, even though it was harsh at times, a good way that kind of broke down what was going on in the situations that we kind of deal with. And I think it's interesting too that even though it's quote unquote harsh, I even know myself trying to tell somebody something and you tell them in a nice way, and either they don't get it because you're not direct enough, or it's vague enough where even if they get it, they could act like they didn't understand because you didn't say directly what it was. And so his harshness, for him to be saying this now, and it's been stuff that a lot of men has been thinking, and not necessarily as harsh as he's putting it, but agree with what he's saying and understand where he's coming from. If it took this long, it's like if this kind of stuff was happening in the first place and there was an understanding of like men don't care about the woman's degrees and cars and stuff like that. You know, we want somebody who's agreeable and who's fit and got themselves together like that, more so than degrees, because, you know, we don't, like the guys, the first thing they're looking at is not their degrees. Like that, right. We probably wouldn't even bring up what you studied or did you have any degrees or anything. So even though they would probably feel proud of that because it's their personal accomplishment, you know, just because it's important to you doesn't mean it's going to be important to them. I'm an artist, so I think art is important. But somebody who don't like art, then that's nothing. I can't do anything with it. I couldn't trade it for $1. You know, it wouldn't matter. And so it's kind of like when you're trying to buy something, you got to check what kind of currency they're using. It can't be like I'm giving you this, you know, this blue money. No, I want green money. And so, I got a lot of blue money. I'm so proud. Look what I did. And here you go. And I'm like, I don't take blue money here.
Right.
You know, because that's the reality.
It's super interesting, like, you know, to just think back to like some of those like harsh things that he would say. But, you know, the focal point on what he was saying was so, you know, it's like, oh, he's being demeaning. He's being mean, you know. And granted, of course, you know, you can always like tailor your approach, but like some of you said earlier, where it kind of hits with this, you know, where you have you know, it's like when white folks get together or other cultures get together, they just get together.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't really have to worry about certain things you do. So like, I guess maybe in the Asian culture, if you Chinese and you get with a Japanese, you know, you kind of got to worry about mixing families, all this kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, but, you know, so outside of those like little nuances, for us, you know, we have so much stigma behind everything, you know, with us, because, for example, you know, we're always supposed to support each other, right? Because there was this carefully orchestrated, you know, plan that was carried out to get us to not support each other, you know, to get us to take the black man from the black woman, to take the black woman from the black man, and, you know, take the black man out the house, and then, you know, white man give, you know, welfare to black women, so you don't need the black man, blah, 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 destroy the black family, prison, the pipeline, the prison, all those different things, right? So all those different layers. So it's like, you know, when you get to a point where it's like, damn, the moment you try to give this harsh truth, and again, some things to me were over the top, but, you know, I mean, I get that the overall sentiment I get was the reality checks, right? But it's kind of hard to sit in the reality check because it's overshadowed by this fact that you're demeaning the black woman, and you shouldn't be doing that, you know, because there's so many other things that demean the black woman already, and this is another thing that's doing it. So, you know, it's so like tricky, where to be honest, but at the same time, and maybe it's just an acknowledgement thing, you know, to say, okay, I'm not trying to belittle anyone. I'm trying to bring like this realistic approach to it. And I think maybe that was just what was lacking.
So what would you consider demeaning? Like an example, not exactly what he said or anything necessarily, but do you have an example of what you would consider what was being said that was kind of demeaning in a way?
I think, you know, I mean, I don't have like a specific example. It's been a while since I've seen this stuff, but, you know, I think what could be misinterpreted for like demeaning is when you tell someone who has like 3 kids, 3 baby daddies, that, you know, she shouldn't necessarily settle, but she shouldn't necessarily be expecting this, which kind of, in a sense, again, it lowers the self-esteem in a sense, because it makes you feel less than because of your life circumstances, you know, and choices that you could have either had some kind of impact on, or B, you didn't. And so, you know, it blames you by your circumstances, you know, so it's like your personality is still the same. You're still a great person,
Yeah.
But you have these circumstances like that are surrounding you. And so, I mean, we know, you aren't your circumstances, but at the same time, you are your experiences. And so I think that's where it kind of happens, where it's like the thin line between demeaning and realistic perspective. But now here's the other piece. This is devil's advocate. Everything is a matter of perspective, right? So, and our perceptions are our realities, right? So yeah, this person can have this perception that they're whatever, and they think they should have all these things, but at the same time, everybody has their own perspective. So, at some point you have to ask, well, who in the hell is Kevin Samuels and why does he matter? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, you have to ask yourself that, like, why does his perspective matter? Like, why? You know what I mean? And this is just, outside of the conversation, outside of my for or against him. It's not even that. It's just, like, you ask yourself, like, why does it matter? Why do any of these celebrities matter? Why do their perspectives matter anyway? So the fact that he's extra harsh, okay, he got a platform because everybody, in a sense, fed into what he was saying, and then that made him even bigger and opened up his platform. So in a sense, you created your own dread because you supported this person who really didn't matter, just another person. So, it's all like a messed up circle that we just kind of keep like perpetuating. This is what it is.
Yeah. The way I kind of take it is his carrot was high value. And he was talking to a particular audience. And somebody who probably didn't have because, okay, like anybody can win the lottery, allegedly, right? But then there's also things that are kind of also, not saying everybody's the same, but you could kind of make some generalizations that are true. And it's kind of like, like I said, when he said stuff to me, it was always kind of like the women who wanted the high value person and they just want to know how to get that. And if he said like, you're not really ready for it or you're not the right type for it, for what he's considering to be whatever, a high value person, when he says like, okay, so they want this, and that, are you these things? And they're saying, well, no. And they're saying, so, why don't you just be with somebody that's average? And there's nothing wrong with average. I grew up blue collar, my parents did, blah, 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 blah. There's nothing wrong with that. And people just like, no, I don't want that. I want this. And so I don't think he was necessarily saying that they necessarily can't, but it's also, a thing where somebody could tell you like, I'm not saying that you can't do this or do that, but the probability or you're not equipped for it, then it's kind of like, yeah, you could be 5'4" and you want to be in the NBA. Yeah, I'm not going to, yeah, okay. Anything's possible, but you're not tall enough. You're not fast enough. You don't have the upper body strength and all this other kind of stuff. And, you got asthma, so it might be hard for you to run. So why don't you do something like golf? And then you'd be offended because they said golf because you want to play basketball. And then you're being demeaned because I'm saying that you're not good enough to play basketball. That's how I kind of see it. I'm like, ugh. Like I said, anybody can do anything they want. But I think that also, if you're not equipped for a situation or ready for a situation or built for a situation, regardless of your hopes and beliefs and feelings for yourself, it's not an option. Regardless of what you think of yourself, it's still more than likely is not going to happen. And if you're looking for something and you ask somebody where to find it and they're saying it's not here, instead of trying, elbow and bum rush yourself into that situation, if they're telling you like it's something that fits you, probably be easier for you or more lined up with you over there, and you asking for somebody's help or what they think, then what's wrong with going over there and seeing if it really is over there for you? Versus just like, you're not going to tell me what I can't be or what I can't do. Because a lot of people that was talking about they want these high value men, it's not like they had them or could find them, they're single and they're getting older. And it's kind of like, so you want to keep striving for something that's probably not probable because you just want to be hard-headed about and just keep going further and further along and just being by yourself and it's harder and harder? Or let me see what's right here in my vicinity that matches up more so the reality of me, not how I feel about myself. You could be working at McDonald's and feeling like you're a millionaire, but you still are surrounded in the environment of McDonald's and everything that affords you.
Yeah.
And for somebody to say you can't afford Ruth Chris, it wouldn't necessarily be a lie. It wouldn't be like you couldn't, but using that McDonald's money, that might cost you your living arrangements for a month so you can eat there one time. But you could do anything, I guess, that you want. So I just think I think people were just kind of more bumping up against the fact of they see it, they want it, and hearing that you can't have it, or this is what you have to have it, and they're just trying to force their way into it. Because the thing about it is, it's like the examples he would get, like, fit, feminine, and something else. It's like nobody want to get counseling, nobody want to lose weight, no one want to be agreeable. They just want to have their way, and they always got to be right. It's like, yeah.
Well, that's
what man, broke or rich, would want some woman that they got to argue with all the time, or not healthy and all that. And that's the thing. But you can't say that while seeming like a jerk.
But I mean, so here you go again, right? So, again, because of the conditioning that is being put out there and followed, it's like, okay, it's almost like you're being pushed for those things to be acceptable, right? Like, this is gonna come. You with this type of woman, just know that's what comes with her. Attitude or whatever. That's what comes with her. Or you with this type of woman, that's what comes with her. Or you with this type of dude, with this type of man. Mm-hmm. So that's what comes with him. And we're just being conditioned for that. And then it's like we have these little, kind of like these little remnants where we break out of it and be like, no, you know what, that's a red flag. I can't mess with that. But then at the same time, you think, well, damn, like, what are you actually bringing to the table? Like, and then even at that point, right? So now younger generation is saying, what? Somebody asked you that, that's a red flag. Like, what do you bring to the table? Because they're automatically thinking, well, so are you with me for what I can bring, or what? And it's like, no, that's not the case. But right. I mean, it's almost like theoretically, you're taking the just blind love out of the equation sometimes, and you think about it, and so that's the realistic piece, right? So it's like when you just meet somebody, you fall for them, and it's good. That's it. Nothing else. I like you too. You got kids? Okay, cool. I got kids. Okay, cool. You know what? Let's just make it happen. Let's just get married, roll off in the sunset.
Yeah.
But then, and that's fairy tale. Then, you have the realistic approach was like, wait, you got 3 kids. Okay, but one of them is in jail. Okay, but then I got 3 kids, but you got 3 boys, and one of them has like a sexual assault charge.
Right.
So I got 3 girls. How's this gonna work? Oh, wait, but they got charges they got to pay for, and you still got lawyer fees. Oh man, okay. And so your baby dad, your ex-husband, he was ex-con, he was in there for murder. Like, so it's like that, but then those different things actually come up. And the fact that you think about them, it takes away from the fairy tale of it. And then it's like, damn, that's harsh. Wait a minute, you're not supposed to be seeing all this. You're supposed to just see me and be like, yeah.
But they also seeing, that the money's good, or the lifestyle and the car and the restaurants that they're going to, and they want to go there too. And it's kind of like what would you accept that for? Would you? And something that I thought was kind of interesting that he would say and bring up sometimes, but he'd be like, the way women are today, would you want your son to be with somebody who's argumentative and don't take care of themselves and all this other kind of stuff? Would you want your son? And they'd be like, no, hell no. Like they'll say that quick. They'll say that quick. Would you want your brother to be with somebody like that? Well, no. So he's kind of looking like, so then what do you? So would you hook up your son with your girlfriend's daughter? Oh no, no. She fights too much, and this is okay. So it for your son, so better for your son, but then you want to be that for some man? Like why would that be okay? And yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, but I think what a lot of women probably couldn't wrap their head around is the fact that, going to school, getting all these degrees, or maybe having a great job, and that kind of don't matter, because a guy could be like, hey, I'll date this IG model, and they're thinking like, well, I have more to offer than that IG model. And it's kind of like, well, if the guy is based off of somebody being agreeable and fit and feminine, then yeah, they would take the IG model, because it wouldn't be all the extra stuff that would go along with it. I'm so smart that you can't tell me what to do. I'm always right. I got these degrees that don't really matter to the man, because the man don't care if you have degrees or not. Or I got my own stuff and guy don't care about it. So that kind of stuff, like I said, confusion is that people are not understanding what the currency is.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as there's a disagreement, and the thing about it is, who controls what the currency that's being accepted? The seller or the buyer?
That's a good question.
Well, the answer is the buyer. That's the answer. Because if you try to sell me something, it's not the way I want it, I'm not buying it. The buyer has the power. Every time.
Yeah, man. It's like I said. I mean, he definitely came with this realistic piece that everybody wasn't ready to hear, because it just took away from the, hey, I like you, well, I like you too, or it almost, and sometimes too, like with us as people, we don't like necessarily for folks to shed light on certain things, like status quo, right? Again, I like you too. Mm-hmm. That's it. Right into the sunset, right?
Right.
But then there's that piece where it's like, hey, you should really look at that before you just like settle down. Like, think about this. Like, are you really going to be happy if you do this and this and this? Hey fellas, like, I'm telling you that, your value is up here, and then so now it's like on the women's side, it's like, wait a minute, you're telling them that they're too good for us? Like, so you're shedding light, so you're making it harder for us. Same deal flipping on the other side, a guy who's like, when he would get on the guys and he would have these conversations about the guys, and he's like, nothing against McDonald's, but you like 50 doing this thing at McDonald's, it's like, but you expecting this. Right. And it's like the same thing. So he's like, oh, wait a minute, so ladies, think about this. If you see yourself as valuable, that's not how valuable. And then it's like for the guys, it's like, well, damn, how you're making it harder for me now. Like, now you shedding light that, or you putting it in her head, you're indoctrinating her that I'm not the shit, like she might have thought I was before you just said, well, you could do better.
Yeah. I don't know. At a certain level, I think everybody kind of know the rules. I think the rules get wonky when it's higher up, just because the air is thinner up there. It's less up there, because we're kind of used to growing up dealing with the, our environments, but that kind of echelon or whatever, not everybody's up there to see that or even know that side of things. So I think it's a little bit different. I think we already kind of know how to deal with, the guy that works at the fast food restaurant or the chick who works the fries and stuff. We already kind of know how all that kind of works. And also, he was saying there's nothing wrong with the fry girl to be with the burger flipper. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And why not, get together and make a life together? So it wasn't like it was like, you can't have this and you're just going to starve. It's kind of like, wouldn't this make sense to have this? This is really probably more at this level. So it wasn't like it wasn't no alternative or no recommendations or anything like that. Because we often talk about marriages and people trying to stick it out and not just getting divorces over frivolous stuff, and how it's mostly women as, filing for divorces and stuff like that, and just different things. He had said something that was kind of interesting, talking about, high value guys have the option to have, other women and stuff like that. And the women would get mad about that. But then there was women that was with, high value men. They were saying, yeah, you might just be the other woman and that's just fine. It's like everybody kind of getting fed the way they wanted to get fed without the extra, Sometimes people, when the light is shining on something, people get funny about how it seems to others, so then they get defensive about it. But if nobody knew, nobody would say anything. So the women were like, oh, I wouldn't want to share no man and this is that and whatever. And he was like, well, if you have a person making this kind of money, this kind of access, and they can have anything they want, if you want them, that might be a thing that goes along with it. Just like if you want this lifestyle where you could be at home and stuff, you might have an overweight bald guy and he may not be attractive to you, but you might have to still sleep with him.
Right.
What is that then? You know what I mean? So are you still concerned? You look past everything you want when it's something that you want. So if you want the money and the lifestyle, then you'll overlook the belly and the bald head. Just like the guy who wants the, what he figures is a fine, cute girl or woman, he'll bypass the attitude. He'll bypass maybe, you know, other stuff that she might have going. Her being immature, maybe, or her being, you know, maybe not worldly. Maybe she doesn't know a lot. So the conversation is going to be awful. But, you know, she's physically attracted. So the guy'd be like, okay, I'll take the IG model that don't maybe have a lot going on because she got what I want. Just like the woman sees the guy at the belly. I don't want that belly, but if it goes along with that house and that car and that vacation, then I'll take it. And so it goes both ways, but it's almost kind of like you only could admit one side of it. Like,
Right.
like the women could be picky about their part, but let the guy say anything, then he's shallow, and how dare he choose like that? How dare he be so superficial? But I think somebody's money and what they have is superficial too.
One of my homeboys, he always experiences this where it's like, you know, she'll say you're too short, you know, you're definitely too short for me. You know what I'm saying? Like anybody under 6 feet, you know, you hear that anybody under 6 feet.
Where did that number come from? I hear even I heard that about that, and they'd be the shortest people in the world. They'd be like 5'3" and want somebody 6 feet tall. Like, it's not a lot of 6 feet tall dudes out there. You might think so because if you watch basketball, but it's not a lot of over 6 feet tall guys. And why would that be your quota if you're 5'3"? Why wouldn't 5'6" be enough, or 5'7"? Why 6 foot?
So, you know, so you got this, you know, that sentiment, right? You know, but then let this dude come up and say, well, and then it's funny, like, you know, so she'll say, okay, well, you know, I can't, you know, if you're under 6 feet, you know, no. Or if you're too short, if I'm taller than you in heels, then no, you're out. You know, but I used to have a homeboy back in college. His rule, and he was slim, fit, not like super, you know, gym rat like, you know, we used to be, but you know, he was in shape or whatever, tall, slim. He had a rule. He was like, he could not talk to a girl that he couldn't fit if he hugged her and his elbow, and he couldn't touch each elbow, he couldn't give her a shot. You know, and everybody was like, like, you know, like, just like, what did he say? You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just like the wildest thing ever. But at the same time, nobody like extra, like, because of that rule, that 6 feet rule, he was good. Yeah. Because he was like 6'3", so he was already good. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was no kind of even double take on that, because, you know, it's just like, well, that's what women like. They like tall guys, whatever. Right. You know, not gonna say nothing, but let you say, oh no, you got to be under this weight class. And it's like, what did you just say? Like, you know, it's so messed up. So, you know, I just think it's about the realistic pieces that kind of made him big, but also made him like controversial too. Yeah,
I think, yeah, because he would he'd be silly, and at first I didn't know it, but, you know, after, you know, listening to his shows and stuff, he started kind of slipping. I started understanding that he was like a geek, because he would mention like Game of Thrones and stuff, and winter is coming, and he'll make Star Wars references and stuff, and he would do his Thanos snap. If I could change it and use my Thanos snap, and he go. I was like, this dude's a geek. He's referencing too much stuff. And I thought it was kind of neat, because it's almost kind of like being young and a geek at that time. You would never understand what your life could potentially be when you got older. You know, like a lot of geeks turn out to be great people, but those wasn't the ones that the girls were going for back in the day. Right. And so now the women see the value of it now, but at the time we would give you the time of day because you wasn't necessarily athletic or whatnot. And it's just funny how that goes. And it kind of plays into also what he was talking about as far as like the things shifting. But I thought it was kind of neat. He was a geek that kind of pulled it together, and he felt comfortable enough to kind of like make references and stuff, because that used to be a thing you would hide from. You wouldn't even mention anything that would make you sound like, you know, that you were, you're a nerd. Nerdy. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. I also came across this video he did. It's called What Your Father Should Have Told You. Oh, it was so powerful, man. My father passed away when I was young, before I started growing facial hair and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And I wish I would have had that video when I was a kid. And I watched that video. It's funny because a lot of stuff I figured out just because you get older and you figure it out, whatever. But it really got to me. I'm like, man, it was just basic stuff. But I'm thinking, like, I never heard anybody say that. I never heard nobody saying, you know, this is for your hygiene, and make sure you do this, and make sure you clean this, and make sure, you know, just some basic stuff. And I'm like, man, if I ever came across a kid that was trying to figure stuff out or lost, I'm like, I hope they come across that video, because it was he was kind of harsh in a way, but he was just funny. He was like, man, they got this powder, and you put down here because you don't be, your crotch smelling crazy and stuff like that, man. Don't. He's just saying stuff, but it was just true. And he's like, hey, man, when you're taking a shower, you don't use your hand. You get a loofah and you scrub your back. There's nobody wash your back. You gotta scrub your back. You gotta get in there. Don't just, it's just funny, just all the stuff. It was funny, but it was just like a big brother or uncle, because everybody don't have those, and a lot of times we grow up with just our moms, and our moms do the best they can, but not all of them are gonna give you all the stuff. They're not gonna tell you all the stuff. They're not gonna tell you the importance of stuff. They don't actually raise you as a man. You're kind of their mate in a way. It's like what they would want for a man. But not a man that you could. My mom did her best. And I have a lot of girl cousins. I will tell you that, okay, for me to be around all them women, right, and to see how they move, how they act, how they talk, and all this other kind of stuff, you would think that I'd be better prepared for women in the real world. I was not. I didn't understand. I never had anybody that potentially could see me as an enemy that I didn't do anything to. You know what I mean? I'm used to people loving me. I'm used to people being kind to me when I'm kind to them. I'm used to certain kind of things. And it's just like, well, they're on a whole different playbook. And so I got kind of busted up a little bit in the beginning, because it took me a while to unlearn what I was learning. It wasn't like, so it just wasn't like, because I'm sure my dad had been like, hey, everybody's not the same. This is how this might go. This is how that might go. Don't, just because you do this doesn't mean you love them. Or just because that happened doesn't mean, just the game that a mom probably wouldn't give you, because she doesn't see it that way. She, like I said, she wants what worked for her. And that's not necessarily what's in the best interest of the boy. It's not on purpose, but that's the result of it, regardless.
Right.
And so you got these boys going out there, they're very emotional like their mom and stuff, and not understanding, like, sometimes you gotta let that mess slide or let it roll off your shoulder versus just taking everything so to heart and everything. It was just interesting. But I saw that video, man, and my younger self, choked up off of that video, because it's kind of like, man, like, I had a better appreciation of him because of that. And even though it wasn't related to the other stuff he was doing, because he was talking about something else, and he had mentioned I think he was talking about some kind of cologne or something like that. He was talking about something totally different, and somebody had messaged him asking him a question about something. And he's like, let me just start from the beginning. Let me just tell you this. Let's start from here. First of all, this is toothpaste. This is it seemed very basic and funny, but if you watch it, it was not. It was kind of like, some people, the stuff he's saying, the products he was saying, the regiment and stuff like that, you would not, it sounds silly until you see it. And then it's kind of like, man, like that should be taught in every school. Yeah, it's almost kind of, I'm probably going to edit this out, but it's almost kind of like, like being a kid and you don't have no man in the house. You don't think to pee standing up.
Right.
But you wouldn't think that growing up in a house with women, that you have the option to stand up and pee in the toilet.
Well, I mean, I'll take it a step further. I used to, growing up with all women, my mom, my sister, my older cousin was like my older sister. After seeing them like walk around with their towels, because they have to cover up their breasts, so they used to walk around with the towel up. I used to do that too, like thinking that was normal. Then it was like a couple other guys that just happened to be at the house, and I just happened to come out, and they were like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And they just corrected me finally. You know what I'm saying? And I had an uncle who was there, but he was trying to be supportive and not be like mean, or not mean, but like kind of, I don't know. I guess he felt like since my mom didn't correct it, he wouldn't say anything.
Right.
Because they knew I wasn't like trying to be a woman, but at the same time, this is the behavior, I'm modeling the behavior. Right. And so, I did that same thing.
Yeah. Like I used my mom's deodorant, Secret.
Mm-hmm.
You know, strong enough for a man, made for a woman. And I used it because that's the kind we had in the house. So we
Right.
didn't have no Old Spice or nothing else. It was just I used Secret, and it's just like, oh, there's men, deodorant. Oh, okay, let me let me try this. So it's just funny how stuff is, and like I said, people do what they can, the best they can, or whatever. But like I said, it's just. And so it's just so many reasons and levels of why we are just not on the same page and everything is just so off kilter. And I don't know if we're even mentally equipped to hear the stuff he was trying to teach. Like I said, I'm a grown man, and a lot of it was just like crazy and hard to hear, but it was the truth. And so I'm sure for a lot of people, and I think it's a lot of grateful people too, glad that he was that uncle or that father figure that said, screw this, I'm just going to tell you the truth how it is. Because this is the kind of conversation you would have like in a barbershop or with your buddies and stuff. And some of the stuff you wouldn't feel comfortable enough to talk to your buddies about. So this would be the person, they care so much that they didn't care about how you would feel to tell you the truth. And that's what,
Right.
and that's what even what good friends do. Sometimes it'd be like, man, that was harsh as hell, but thank you for telling me. Because
I had to tell you this.
Because everybody else would have walked around and let me looking like a fool. And so I think he was doing that. And now sometimes he seemed like he was doing too much sometimes, but very seldom that I felt. But he kind of stuck to his guns. Like he was even talking about like, don't be having no babies before you're married. And he's very traditional in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it is, even though the stuff is traditional and kind of dated, it kind of kept everything in line. And it's funny how, like the game Jenga, that's kind of set up with the blocks and it looks like it's sturdy and whatnot, turn around and some of the main blocks are pulled out of it. And so we have the appearance of being sturdy and secure, but we're really not, because so many of the fundamental pieces that need to be in certain places are not there. And so when it would take a lot normally to knock it down, it just takes one little thing. And then the whole thing crashes because it just wasn't built on a good foundation.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to tell somebody who has this house that your foundation is crap and it won't be able to sustain you. And your security and comfort in that home is a delusion. And it will hurt you if you don't start fortifying that base. If you don't, what you ignore will hurt you. Yeah, and it takes a special person to be able to do that. Most of us just go through just not starting anything because we don't want no extra mess. It's hard to tell people the truth sweetly or harshly or in between. It's hard to speak to things, even that it's true, because you will be judged or prosecuted in a way for those things, regardless if it's true or not. And we sometimes prefer politeness and things not being said for our comfort. But it doesn't really, it's almost like a parent letting a kid do whatever they want to because you don't want the kid to feel bad. Yeah, but what are you actually doing to that kid? It's kind of like, okay, they don't feel bad, but then they'll grow up and actually be bad.
And as soon as somebody checks them, they're going to be like, what?
Yeah, that's almost like, the parent didn't check the kid for talking back and acting up, but then the cop got to check you, and it's too late.
Right. It's too late, yeah.
You're going to get checked eventually. You want it from home before you get it from the outside, because the outside does not see you the same way.
Yeah, you are a threat. And, just to piggyback on that, like, we need more of that. It's just hard now because it's like society is always governing something, right? And so it's like, you want to govern your kids this way, but society says, oh, that's too harsh. You have to govern it like this. And then when they're adults and it's like, oh, man, like, society says, now you need to be like this, now that you're an adult. But it's like, wait a minute, you told them to be like this when they're kids. Now all of a sudden you want them to do this when they're adults? No, they don't. They don't have that. Like, that's not in their, psychology, you know what I'm saying? Like, to do that, like, but you expect them to, because you didn't want me to do this as a kid, because you say like spanking kids are bad, even though white folks taught us that, spanking kids are bad, right? But then it's like, well, okay, again, you're finna step out here in this street and the first time some dude runs up on you and you a pompous asshole and, y'all in the sandbox and he got the biggest stick, then it's like, oh my God, it's a problem. Or the cops, same deal. That's the way it is. Or, and looping it back to where we were, some woman or some man tells you, that you aren't necessarily as special as you think you are. You're just like everybody else.
Yeah.
It's just, you can be the most special thing in the world to that person.
Right.
But outside of that, you just like everybody else. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and maybe to that one person that thinks you like the most special person in the world, that's great.
Right.
manifest that, harness that, embrace it, but don't be mad when, I guess, don't be surprised when certain people don't necessarily consider you the most special person in the world, because you don't do it for them. That's not the person that's supposed to see you as the most special person in the world, as you are.
Right. That's the
You know?
truth. That's the truth. Yeah, and like I said, sometimes he would share stories about his aunt that he had to, the family had to check on because she never got married and now she's older and everybody got to check in on her because they don't know, because she could pass away and nobody would even know she was in the house by herself. And we all have aunties and stuff that ended up alone, and just kind of ride or died. Like, I don't need no man and all this other kind of stuff. And they have that, lonely life by themselves while they was trying to, have it their way and all this other kind of stuff and end up alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have family members like that. And it's just unfortunate because they could be sweet people, but it's almost kind of like if you're not trying to, I'm not saying you got to take people's crap and stuff, but sometimes having things your way leaves you with yourself because you're the only person who's going to accept it and probably nobody else. And so that's a harsh reality. And so sticking to your guns, just sometimes, depending on what that is, it could lead you into a life that you didn't expect for yourself. And there's less stuff out there nowadays for services and stuff to help folks,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just different times. And so, the world, the government ain't trying to help nobody and do anything. It used to be stuff in place back in the day so people could get away with being alone. Nowadays, you could be together and you still paycheck to paycheck trying to keep a roof over your head. So this world is not built for single people. And, if something is not necessarily wrong, because he would even say stuff like, asking people like, why'd you break up, and trying to find out why and be like, hey, if you still single, he's still single and nothing really happened, you guys are just disagreeing about certain kind of things, get back with your man, because it'll be easier to get back with him than it would be somebody think you're going to find somebody who's going to come in and take care of you. He said, like nowadays, back in the day, you could be a stepdad and people admired you for it. And nowadays, they use it against you. So the daughter could be mad at him and say, hey, he touched me. And then what happens to him? His whole life is ruined. Anything can happen. And so why would you risk that somebody's kid could possibly be saying something because you said something that she didn't like and she accused you of something? And then what? Because you're going to automatically take your kid's side, which makes sense, but then he didn't do anything. It just could be, what would be the reason why somebody would risk everything they had for that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Or what happens with another kid? Do you guys have a kid together? His money should go towards what? Should his money go towards, your original kid and our kid together? That's not fair to him. But he's paying for everything. Is that fair to him? Just saying stuff like that. And like I said, not to say those situations still wouldn't happen, like a woman couldn't find another man or a single guy get with a woman who have a child. He's not saying that wouldn't happen. But just hearing that kind of stuff and thinking it that way, you probably move differently and expect differently too. And understand if somebody is going out their way and doing that kind of stuff, how lucky they are to have somebody to do that, versus thinking like they're obligated. Well, that's your kid now. You married me, so that's your kid. So now, this is... Yeah, like I said, I think I'm glad that I came across him. I'm glad that I got a chance to, I used to watch the shows all the time on a normal basis. And even though, like I said, sometimes it'd be rough. And I'm not even single, but yet and still, I just loved, it's like you just see like a mystery going and you just want to see how it's going to turn out. And just to see and just kind of seeing his popularity grow, and then couples who called in and said that they fixed their relationship because of him, or just the perspective, or the women just not understanding, trying to force their way into situations, thinking they could argue something, versus because they had this woman that her man left because he just got tired of her just yelling and arguing all the time, and he left her, and she wanted him back, and he went and found somebody else. And he's like, so why are you yelling at him if he just asked you he wanted some peace and you wouldn't do it? She's like, well, I don't know. But I think
I saw that one. Yeah.
And she's like, I'm better now. And he's like, well, what good is that doing? That's not gonna. Yeah, he's gone. He's moved on. So so it's just like interesting. And the cool thing about it is you get to hear stuff you need to hear, even though he's not directly talking to you. You get the benefit of not necessarily getting the shot, but you could get the residual medicine without you actually having to get the shot. So even though he's not talking to you, if that situation sounds familiar, then the advice he's giving that person, you could probably apply to yourself.
Right.
Which I think is kind of cool. And really, what it really boiled down to, he had kind of like a relationship show that was optional, that you had to call in and say you wanted it. He didn't bring anybody in. You asked for it, and he gave his opinion, and you could take it or leave it or whatnot.
Right.
But I thought it was very cool for him to just be on that constant with that many different people coming in with different situations. And he had all his facts together, his statistics together, his wisdom together, you know. So if somebody tried to go the religion angle, he had that down. If he tried to go his historical thing, he would go down that route. It's just like, you know, his experiences and stuff. I thought it was just really, really, really neat. And it just made me just, even as just a person, just wanting to be more well-versed on things. I think I know some stuff, but I thought it was just really neat how versed he was in so many different things and how it all kind of comes together and how you could kind of use that kind of thing to express yourself in a way that could be life-changing for folks. But if people feel hurt and don't like what he said, that's fine, that's fair. But I don't think it's fair if he or anybody else is just judged on a soundbite or a clip of something without kind of, you know, getting a chance to know a person by the work that they do. And if somebody could listen to NWA back in the day and The Chronic with chicks ain't nothing but hoes and all that kind of stuff, if you could go unoffended from that and singing that and dancing to that, then you could get over your average at best. I think you're tempered enough to be able to survive, you know, your 6 or your average at best, or the stuff he was saying. If you survive the 90s and West Coast hip hop, gangster rap, you could survive Kevin Samuels' evaluation of a person who asked to be evaluated.
Right. Yeah, true that, bro. Yeah, man. Well, for all those who listening, man, y'all go ahead and give it a shot. You know, I didn't extra listen to him. I'm gonna be honest, I only saw sound bites and stuff, and then I caught a couple of videos and stuff. But I'm open-minded to know, like, you know, if I didn't see the whole thing, like, I can't just really be out here dogging it. But, you know, check it out for yourself and, you know, see if you dig it. You know what I mean?
Well, Wayne, I appreciate you saying that. And also, that's why I wanted to talk to you about this, because like I said, you're very young, but you're very wise and you're very open. And you never just run into a situation without kind of assessing it or giving it the benefit of the doubt, which I'm sure does well for you.
Well, except for that. I'll say, except for Bel Air, I did judge Bel Air before. I did judge Bel Air before I watched it, and then I watched it. I was like, oh, this is kind of dope.
Yeah, I think part of that was because of the source who was bringing it up more so.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I think because sometimes you just do that just to flex more so than that's how you feel. Sometimes it's just like the delivery system is just you know.
It's like, wait a minute, what? Yeah. So, but that was like the one and only. But other than that, yeah, man, you know, you just gotta be open. You know what I'm saying? And you know, that's gonna help you in life yourself. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the more open you are to learning and to bettering yourself, the better you're gonna put yourself in position for a number of different things, not just for women and men, you know, but just in general. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just put yourself in better position in general. So be open.
Yeah, so true. And I guess the main thing I want people to know is be open to help and be able to recognize help too, even if it's not coming from a familiar place, even if it's not delivered the way you think it's delivered. I think truth is in a lot of things, and I think sometimes we're just so used to, if we don't recognize it, we reject it, that we miss out on a lot, because there's a lot of things that presents itself to be for us and helpful that's the exact opposite. And so if that's possible, it's possible for it to work the other way, where the things that are making us afraid or uncomfortable are things that we really need to help us, because we're not really used to things being out there really to help us. So it would be foreign. It would feel funny. But always look twice at those kind of things, or at least investigate to find out why that is. Because usually if you're feeling the ways about it, there's something to it. And sometimes it's not your first thought of, it's bad because it made me feel off. Sometimes, growth hurts. That's why they have growing pains. That's why That's a thing. That's why, everything costs. Everything costs. And even the truth cost. So, but yeah, so rest in peace to Mr. Kevin Samuels. He took on a lot that he didn't have to do. He could have sold books and t-shirts and kind of ran off with the money and kind of just been selfish, but I think he gave more than people knew that he was doing. And this is from somebody who, creates art, t-shirts and whatever, and just do different stuff. So I understand, like, it's so much stuff that people are selling don't have anything really to offer. And he did the exact opposite of not selling anything, but was there night after night, giving himself, his experiences, his wisdom, his concerns, and just was there kind of showing up and not asking for anything else, just kind of giving. Who does that? Who does that? And so I, for one, appreciate him. And to tell you the truth, I'm not even the person I think he was even really for, but I still even got something out of it. And so for that, I'm greatly appreciative to him for that. And, but yeah. Did you have anything else, Wayne the Q?
Nah, man, y'all check it out. Have your own opinions. That's the only way we do it. So that's it.
That's right. All right. That's been Jay and Wayne the Q. Until next time.
Peace easy.
Peace.
If you have an issue with me, you can't have an issue with what I say. Brothers, what it comes down to is there are a lot of folks who are upset that you're actually trying to become better versions of yourself. You got to ask yourself, why are so many people threatened by black men wanting to become better versions of themselves, black women want to become better versions of themselves, and black men and black women saying they want to deal with one another? Why are so many people threatened by that? Anyway, got to get up out of here. Until the next time, peace. We are gone.
Thanks for listening, and please like and subscribe. Be sure to check out past and future episodes of this show, along with my other shows entitled The Movie Bench Quarterbacking Podcast and The J and Podcast, available now on all streaming platforms. Until next time, peace.